You know how people say desperation makes you do crazy things? That was me. After months of failed dates and enough rejections to fill a novel, I hit my breaking point. Tinder became my last-ditch effort to find someone. Honestly, I expected nothing, just another app, more swiping, more disappointment. Then I saw her. Melissa's profile stopped me cold. Long blonde hair, blue eyes that seemed to sparkle even through a screen, and this confident smile that made me pause. Her bio read, adventurer, dreamer, lover of mysteries. There was something about her that felt magnetic. I swiped right. When the match notification popped up, my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the match, it was how quickly she messaged. Hey Sam, what's your wildest adventure? The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked for hours about road trips, weird diners, and our mutual love of hiking. She felt real, but too perfect. A part of me couldn't shake the idea that she might be a scammer or worse, a catfish. That's when she suggested a video call. I hesitated, half afraid I'd see someone entirely different. But when the screen lit up, there she was, exactly as her pictures showed. Even better, her laugh was contagious, and the way she listened made me forget every doubt. Then she said it. You should come visit me. I live near Silver Lake in Los Angeles. I'd love to show you around. It sounded insane. 8 hours of driving for someone I'd just met online, but there was something about her, something I couldn't ignore. Against all logic, I said yes. The drive was long, but Melissa's constant texts made it easier. At first, they were sweet. Drive safe, and can't wait to meet you. But as I got closer, her tone shifted. Where are you exactly? You're not lost, right? Keep me updated. It felt a little obsessive, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just nervous. By the time I reached the outskirts of Silver Lake, the sun was setting. The roads grew narrower, lined with dense trees that seemed to close in on me. My GPS led me to a winding path, and eventually, I arrived at a house that didn't match the Melissa I thought I knew. The place was old, peeling paint, boarded up windows, and an overgrown lawn. For a moment, I double-checked the address, hoping I'd made a mistake. But then the door creaked open, and there she was. Melissa's smile lit up the gloomy surroundings. She ran out to greet me, throwing her arms around me like we'd known each other for years. For a moment, I forgot about the eerie house behind her. She looked so genuinely happy to see me that I pushed the unease aside. Come in, she said, taking my hand. It's cozier inside, I promise. As we walked in, I glanced back at the house, and that's when I saw it. Movement in an upstairs window. A man. He was pale, with sunken eyes, staring right at me. My stomach turned. Melissa, I said, trying to sound casual. Does someone else live here? She followed my gaze and frowned. No, it's just me. Why? I hesitated, but before I could explain, she tugged me inside, saying, You've had a long drive. Let me get you something to drink. I wanted to believe her, but something felt wrong. The house wasn't as cozy as Melissa promised. The living room was dimly lit, with mismatched furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Old photos lined the mantel, but they were turned face down as if someone didn't want them to be seen. Melissa seemed unfazed. She moved around the house with ease, chatting about local spots we could visit. I tried to focus on her voice, but my mind kept drifting back to that man in the window. During dinner, the unease grew. I heard faint creaks from upstairs. Footsteps, maybe? I glanced at Melissa, but she didn't seem to notice. Melissa, I said, setting down my fork. Are you sure no one else is here? I swear I saw someone earlier. Her smile faltered for just a second before she laughed. Sam, this house is old. It makes weird noises. Trust me, it's just us. I nodded, but her reaction didn't convince me. Later that evening, she showed me to the guest room. As I unpacked, I noticed a door at the end of the hallway, locked with a rusted padlock. It felt out of place, almost ominous. Hey, what's in there? I asked casually. Melissa's face tightened. Just storage, the lock's broken, so I don't bother with it. Her tone was final, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and right above me. My heart pounded as I sat up, straining to listen. The house was still except for those steps which seemed to circle the room above mine. I grabbed my phone, hesitating to wake Melissa. Instead, I decided to check it out myself. Creeping into the hallway, I saw that the locked door at the end was slightly ajar. A faint light flickered inside. Against every instinct, I stepped closer. Pushing the door open, I found a small room covered in symbols scratched into the walls. In the corner stood a dusty rocking chair, slowly moving back and forth as if someone had just left it. Then I saw him, the man. He was standing in the shadows, his face barely visible. My breath caught as he stepped closer, his sunken eyes locking onto mine. Before I could react, Melissa's voice echoed behind me. "Sam, what are you doing?" I spun around and she looked terrified. "You shouldn't be in here," she said, grabbing my arm. "Come on." But I turned back, but the man was gone. Melissa led me back to the living room, avoiding my questions. "It's just an old house," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Sometimes it feels like it has a life of its own." That wasn't enough for me. "Melissa, you're not telling me everything. Who was that man?" Her face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Frustrated, I decided to stay awake and keep watch. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, a loud crash from downstairs. I rushed to the living room to find the sliding door shattered. Standing in the yard, illuminated by the moonlight, was the man. This time, he didn't run. He stood there, pointing toward the woods. Melissa appeared behind me, gasping. "It's him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. We called the police, but when they arrived, the man was gone. The officers searched the woods but found nothing. One of them pulled us aside. "This isn't the first call we've had about this place. My advice? Leave." By morning, we packed our things and left. Melissa refused to talk, her hands trembling the entire drive. When we reached her friend's apartment, she finally broke down. "This house, it's cursed," she admitted. "I bought it cheap because the previous owners disappeared. I thought it was just rumors, but now, I don't know." We tried to move on, but the memories clung to us. Melissa sold the house, and though we stayed together for a while, the trauma eventually pulled us apart. Even now, I can't explain what happened, but every so often when I'm alone, I swear I feel eyes watching me. Some places aren't meant to be lived in. Some mysteries should stay buried, and some invitations should never be accepted. You know, I've always been a bit skeptical about dating apps. After a string of awkward and downright disappointing experiences, I swore them off for good. But like always, my friends wouldn't let me live in peace. They kept saying, "Come on, man, you just haven't met the right one yet. Give it another shot." Against my better judgment, I caved, and that's how I ended up downloading Tinder again on a boring Thursday night. It didn't take long for me to start swiping aimlessly. Most profiles were the usual mix of selfies and vacation shots, nothing that really stood out. But then I came across Elena. She had this hauntingly beautiful vibe. Dark hair, sharp eyes, and a subtle smile that felt oddly inviting. Her photos were simple but classy. There were 4 in total. 2 of her in what looked like her backyard, 1 by a lake, and the last one standing in front of the Red Rocks Amphitheater. Something about her intrigued me, though in hindsight maybe it was the simplicity of her profile that should have been my first red flag. No friends in her photos, no hobbies or interests listed, just her name, age, and a few words. Looking for something real. Against my better judgment, I swiped right. We matched instantly. Elena messaged me first, which was surprising. Most of the time, matches never even turn into conversations. But she broke the ice quickly. Her messages were short but engaging, and she seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Before I knew it, we were texting back and forth like old friends. Then, she asked, "What are you doing tonight?" I hesitated. It's not like I had plans, but inviting someone over I just met online wasn't exactly my style. Still, she seemed eager, and my friends' voices were in the back of my head, egging me on to take a chance. So, I told her, "Nothing much, just relaxing at home." Her response came instantly. "Want company?" It wasn't the smoothest way to plan a first date, but something about her curiosity felt disarming. I agreed and gave her my address. After all, my place was safe enough. My bedroom was in the basement with a separate entrance. No harm, right? We set a time for her to come over, and at 8 p.m. sharp, she messaged me, "I'm here." I headed to the side door leading to my basement, and sure enough, Elena was standing there. Her punctuality was almost unsettling, like she'd been counting the seconds to our meeting. She was dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, but something about her presence felt off. "Hey," I greeted, trying to ease the awkwardness. She smiled faintly, stepping inside without much of a word. I led her down the stairs into my room, doing my best to make small talk. As we sat down, I couldn't shake the weird vibe she gave off. Her laughter was too sharp, almost mechanical, like she wasn't used to laughing at all. She answered my questions with one-word responses, and when I asked her how long it took to get here, she just laughed. A cold, unsettling laugh, and stared at me without saying a word. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was nervous. I turned on the TV to fill the silences, hoping it would lighten the mood. But as I pretended to laugh at the show, I noticed something chilling. Elena wasn't watching the TV. She was watching me, the whole time. Her gaze never broke, her expression unreadable. I felt my stomach tighten. My room, which usually felt cozy and safe, suddenly felt small, almost suffocating. I needed an excuse to get her out of there. I faked a yawn and said, "Hey, I just remembered I have an early shift tomorrow. I should probably get some rest." Her expression barely changed. "You sure?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. I thought we were having fun. I forced a smile and walked her to the door, trying to appear polite but firm. She lingered at the entrance like she didn't want to leave. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stepped outside. I locked the door behind her and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Elena. "You sure you have to go to bed? I was having fun." I stared at the message, my gut telling me something was seriously wrong. I ignored her message and tossed my phone on the nightstand. Whatever fun she thought she was having, I was done with it. I needed to sleep and forget this entire night ever happened. I grabbed a snack from the kitchen upstairs, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. When I got back to my room, my phone lit up with more notifications. 3 new messages. The first 2 were just question marks, but the third one sent a chill down my spine. "Hello? Why aren't you answering me?" The sheer persistence made my skin crawl. I decided then and there to block her number. I didn't owe her anything. After all, we just met, and it wasn't like I'd let her on. I swiped to block her, tossed my phone back on the charger, and crawled into bed, finally feeling some relief, at least for a little while. Around 2 a.m., I woke up abruptly. It wasn't unusual for me. I've always been a light sleeper. But something felt off. The room was darker than normal, the air heavier. My eyes darted to my nightstand, instinctively reaching for my phone to check the time. But it wasn't there. Panic flickered through me. I knew I'd left it on the charger. I always left it there. Groggily, I scanned the room, my heart racing faster with every passing second. That's when I heard it, a faint, buzzing sound. It was coming from the direction of the laundry room. The laundry room was connected to my bedroom, a small, dimly lit space with a creaky door that never fully shut. I got up, switched on the LED lights lining my wall to cast a faint red glow, and hesitated. The buzzing continued, rhythmic and insistent. My feet felt like lead as I stepped toward the laundry room door and pushed it open. The sound grew louder, vibrating against the metal drum of the washing machine. There it was, my phone, placed squarely on top of the washer, shaking with each buzz. My stomach dropped. I hadn't been in the laundry room all night. I grabbed the phone, and the screen lit up. There were new messages from an unknown number. My hands trembled as I opened them. The first was a picture of me sleeping, taken from the doorway of my room. The angle was perfect, showing me curled up under my blanket, completely unaware. The second message was worse. It read, "Nice try blocking me." The third one? "Next time, lock your door." I froze, my mind racing. I hadn't locked the door when she left. I was so focused on getting her out of my space that I completely forgot. And now, standing there in the dim light of the laundry room, it hit me. She had come back. She had been in my room while I slept. Suddenly, the air felt suffocating. My eyes darted to the darkest corner of the room, where the old boiler sat. The shadows around it seemed to twist and shift, and for a moment I swore I saw movement. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. What if she was still here, hiding, watching? I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to look. Instead, I bolted upstairs, taking the stairs two at a time until I reached my parents' bedroom. I banged on the door, my voice cracking as I called out for them. They opened the door, groggy and confused, but the fear in my voice snapped them to attention. "We need to call the police," I said, breathless. She was in the house. The officers arrived faster than I expected, probably because of the panic in my dad's voice when he called 911. They searched the entire house, including the laundry room. Nothing. No sign of Elena, or whoever she really was. But the messages on my phone told a different story. They confirmed she'd been there, taking photos and leaving just enough evidence to make my skin crawl. When I handed my phone to one of the officers, he frowned and asked, "Are you sure her name is Elena?" That's when the real nightmare began. The officer's question hung in the air like a bad omen. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaky. He glanced at his partner, then back at me. "We'll need to investigate further, but it's possible the name she gave you isn't real. This isn't the first report we've had of incidents like this. They took my phone as evidence, assuring me they'd trace the number and look into her background. Meanwhile, I was left in a state of dread, jumping at every creak in the house. Sleep was out of the question. My parents stayed awake with me in the living room, the TV droning on in the background, though none of us were really watching. By mid-morning, I received a call from the lead officer. "We traced the number," he said. "The woman you know as Elena is actually Margaret Langley. She has a long history of stalking, breaking, and entering, and even a few charges of assault." My stomach churned. How did she even find me? "Margaret uses fake profiles on dating apps to find targets," he explained. "Once she establishes contact, she learns everything she can. Addresses, routines, vulnerabilities. You're lucky you called us when you did." Lucky? That's not how I felt. Hearing her real name didn't bring relief. It only made things worse. Margaret wasn't just a random stranger. She was a predator, someone who had methodically planned her way into my life. The officer continued, "We've issued a warrant for her arrest, but she's not at her listed address. Stay vigilant and keep your doors locked. She's unpredictable." That was the understatement of the year. Days turned into weeks, and though the police assured me they were on it, Margaret or Elena remained a ghost. I changed my locks, installed cameras, and even moved my bed away from the door. But none of it could shake the feeling of being watched. One night, as I was scrolling through the news on my laptop, I saw her face in a headline: "Wanted for stalking and breaking and entering." It was surreal seeing her picture plastered across the screen. The article described her as a master manipulator, someone who thrived on creating fear and chaos. She had evaded capture for years, using fake identities to stay ahead of the law. Reading about her didn't make me feel any safer. It only solidified the paranoia that had been eating away at me since that night. Every shadow outside my window, every creak in the house, it all felt like her. The last straw came when I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper one morning. It was simple, written in her eerily familiar handwriting. "I'll be seeing you." That same day, I packed my bags and moved out of state. I couldn't take the chance of her finding me again. Even now, months later, I still double-check my locks every night. I avoid dating apps like the plague, and every time I meet someone new, I question their motives. Margaret changed me in ways I didn't expect, ways I hate. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't lurking in the shadows. They're the ones who smile at you, swipe right, and wait for you to let them in. Moving to Flagstaff felt like the right decision at the time. After years of the fast-paced chaos in Los Angeles, I thought the quieter, picturesque town would be the reset I needed. But as the months passed, I realized something was missing. I spent my days as a paramedic, constantly surrounded by emergencies, but when the shift ended, the silence of my small apartment was deafening. One particularly lonely evening, I gave in to modern loneliness. I downloaded a dating app. At first, I wasn't serious, just scrolling through profiles to pass the time. That's when I saw her, Elise. Her profile wasn't like the others. No exaggerated filters or empty captions. Just a simple photo of her hiking in the woods, smiling like she belonged there. Her bio was straightforward. Hiking, stargazing, and good conversations. Swipe if you like adventures. It was refreshing, genuine. I swiped right. A few minutes later, the notification popped up. "It's a match." She messaged first. "Do you like stargazing?" Our conversation flowed effortlessly. We bonded over our shared love for the outdoors and the absurd things we'd seen in our jobs. Me as a paramedic and her as an ER nurse. Over the next few days, we kept chatting, and eventually she suggested we meet. "Coconino National Forest is beautiful at night," she said. "There's this spot where you can see the Milky Way like nowhere else. It's magic." Her enthusiasm was contagious, but the idea of meeting a stranger in the middle of nowhere made me hesitate. "That's pretty remote," I replied, trying to sound casual. She laughed. "Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. Trust me, it's worth it." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself I was being paranoid. What could go wrong? Friday night, I found myself driving down a winding road through the Coconino National Forest. The trees loomed like silent sentinels on either side, their branches clawing at the dark sky. My GPS signal had dropped about 15 minutes ago, so I was relying on the handwritten directions Elise had sent me. "Take the dirt road after the mile marker. Follow it until you see the wooden gate." The road was so isolated that it felt like I'd fallen off the map. A single pair of headlights appeared in my rear-view mirror, a truck that seemed to be tailing me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but as the minutes passed, the truck stayed uncomfortably close. Finally, it overtook me, the roar of its engine shattering the eerie silence. As it sped past, I caught a glimpse of the driver, a man in a trucker hat with a cigarette dangling from his lips. He didn't even glance at me. Shaking off the unease, I pressed on. Eventually, the dirt road ended at the promised wooden gate, and there it was, Elise's car. She was leaning against the hood, wrapped in a flannel jacket, her smile just as warm as I remembered from her profile. "I thought you got lost," she teased. The spot she'd chosen was stunning. The clearing opened up to a sky filled with stars, brighter and more vivid than I'd ever seen. For a moment, the tension in my chest eased. "You weren't kidding," I said, sitting down beside her. "This is incredible." But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Elise was charming, but I started noticing little things. She kept glancing at her phone, her fingers tapping nervously on her knee. Whenever I asked her about herself, she gave short, vague answers and quickly redirected the conversation back to me. "Why don't we just enjoy the stars?" she said at one point, forcing a smile. I tried to relax, but the uneasy feeling only grew stronger when I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. My heart raced as I turned to look, just shadows swaying with the wind. Still, I couldn't shake the paranoia. Suddenly, a pair of headlights pierced through the darkness. A truck rolled into the clearing, its engine growling like a predator. It was the same truck that had passed me earlier. A man climbed out. He was big, easily 6 feet tall, with a beard that made him look like a lumberjack straight out of a horror movie. He didn't speak at first, just stared at us with cold, assessing eyes. "This is private property," he said finally, his voice low and gravelly. "We didn't know," Elise said quickly, standing up. Her voice sounded tight, almost rehearsed. "Didn't know or didn't care?" the man asked, taking a step closer. I stood too, trying to defuse the situation. "Look, we'll leave. No problem." The man stared at me for a moment too long before spitting on the ground and turning back to his truck. "You better." As the man's truck disappeared into the forest, I turned to Elise. "What the hell was that about?" "I don't know," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Let's just go." Something about her tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She grabbed her things and walked toward her car, but I stayed behind, scanning the clearing. That's when I saw it. Her phone lying on the ground, screen lit up with a series of messages. "He's here. Truck ready? Make it quick." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Elise wasn't some innocent girl looking for a connection. This was a setup. Before I could react, headlights appeared again. The truck roared back into the clearing, and Elise sprinted toward it, shouting, "Hurry up!" I barely had time to process what was happening before the man jumped out holding a crowbar. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. Adrenaline surged as he swung the crowbar. I dodged just in time, the metal whistling past my ear. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, backing away. The man grinned, a twisted expression that sent chills down my spine. "You're tonight's entertainment." Elise was rummaging through my car, her voice sharp. "Get his keys and phone, let's go." I realized then that I had two choices: fight or die. Grabbing the tire iron from my trunk, I swung it with all my strength, catching the man in the shoulder. He staggered, but didn't go down. "Stupid move," he spat, lunging at me again. We grappled, and I managed to shove him into the side of his truck. Elise screamed, "Forget it, let's go." The man hesitated, clearly torn between finishing me off and fleeing. That moment of hesitation saved my life. I bolted for the tree line, my heart pounding as I dialed 911 on my phone. By the time the police arrived, the clearing was empty. Elise and her accomplice were gone, leaving behind only tire tracks and a shattered sense of safety. Days later, officers found their truck abandoned on a back road near Sedona. Inside were knives, duct tape, handcuffs, and a disturbing collection of driver's licenses and wallets, souvenirs from previous victims. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to being another one of their trophies. Even now, whenever I look up at the stars, I feel that same chill, a reminder of the night I almost didn't make it home. I had no idea that a lazy Friday night in Bloomington would change my life forever. Visiting my old high school buddy Matt at Indiana University was supposed to be a chill weekend. Some beers, bad movies, and reminiscing about dumb stuff we did as kids. But that night, Matt got sucked into a last-minute project, leaving me bored out of my mind. That's when I opened Tinder. I wasn't expecting much. Swipe left, swipe right. It was all mindless entertainment until I saw her. Claire. She had this magnetic smile, like she knew something you didn't. Her piercing green eyes and messy blonde hair gave her this wild, carefree vibe. Her bio sealed the deal. Love Lake Monroe, true crime podcasts, and adventures. It felt like fate. I swiped right and bam, instant match. Our conversation flowed effortlessly. She was funny, charming, and just mysterious enough to keep me intrigued. She mentioned living close to the lake and casually suggested I come over. "I promise I'm not a serial killer," she joked. I laughed it off. What were the odds? She sent me her address, and though a small part of me hesitated, curiosity got the better of me. As I grabbed my jacket, Matt glanced up from his laptop. "Where are you headed?" "Just meeting someone I matched with on Tinder," I said, trying to sound casual. Matt smirked. Don't end up in one of those dating app gone wrong documentaries. I laughed, but his words stuck with me. Still, I shrugged them off. It's not like those things actually happen, right? The address she sent was about a 15-minute walk, so I decided to hoof it. The night was chilly, the kind where the air bites at your face and makes your breath visible. As I walked, the neighborhoods grew quieter, the streetlights fewer and farther apart. By the time I reached her area, the silence was unsettling. The houses were older, with peeling paint and sagging porches. Claire's house stood alone at the end of the street, partially hidden by tall trees. Its porch light flickered weakly, and I noticed the blinds in one window shift slightly. Was someone watching me? I shook off the thought and texted her, "I'm here." Seconds later, the front door creaked open. Claire stood in the doorway, smiling. She looked even better in person, though something about her seemed off. "Come on in," she said, stepping aside. The house smelled faintly of damp wood, like it hadn't been aired out in years. As I stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind me, louder than it should have. "Make yourself comfortable," Claire said, motioning to a worn couch. "I'll grab us some drinks." As she disappeared into the kitchen, I looked around. The living room was dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and strange decorations. The walls were lined with old photographs, but they weren't of Claire or anyone I recognized. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like someone talking behind a closed door. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise, right? But as I sat there, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't words I could understand, just the rhythmic rise and fall of voices. Claire returned with 2 beers and sat down beside me. "Here you go," she said, smiling. I forced a smile back, taking a sip even though my throat felt dry. "So," I said, trying to sound casual, "do you live alone?" She hesitated just for a fraction of a second. "Yeah," she said, "it's just me." The whispers stopped abruptly, as if on cue. I glanced toward the hallway where the sound had come from. A door at the end was slightly ajar, and I could see faint light spilling out. "Hey, are you sure there's no one else here?" I asked, my voice cracking. Claire's smile faded. "Why do you ask?" Before I could answer, the door at the end of the hallway creaked open wider. I froze, my beer slipping from my hand and landing on the carpet with a dull thud. Claire didn't move. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. "You know," she said, her tone suddenly cold, "you shouldn't have come here." My heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" The whispers started again, louder now, coming from the room at the end of the hallway. Then a shadow moved, tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakably human. Panic surged through me. "Who's in there?" I demanded. Claire stood slowly, her smile returning, but now it was twisted into something sinister. "You're not leaving," she said. I bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock didn't just resist, it felt welded shut. "Stay," Claire said behind me, her voice almost sing-song. I turned to see her standing in the hallway now, the shadowed figure stepping out of the room behind her. He was holding something, a knife glinting in the faint light. Adrenaline kicked in, and I ran for the kitchen, where I'd seen a back door earlier. The back door was locked, but the lock was old and loose. I rammed into it with my shoulder, and it gave way, sending me stumbling into the backyard. Behind me, I heard Claire and the man shouting. Their footsteps were heavy, pounding against the floorboards as they chased after me. I sprinted toward the woods, the cold air burning my lungs. The trees closed in around me, their branches clawing at my face and arms. "Get him!" Claire screamed. I pushed myself harder, refusing to look back. The ground was uneven, and I tripped more than once, but sheer terror kept me moving. Eventually the shouting faded, but I didn't stop. Not until I saw a faint light in the distance, a cabin. The cabin was small and decrepit, but it was shelter. I stumbled inside and slammed the door behind me, locking it. The interior was just as unsettling as Claire's house. The walls were covered in photos of me, pictures from earlier that night, from when I'd arrived at Claire's house. On the table, there was a knife, rope, and duct tape along with a phone. The phone buzzed and I hesitantly picked it up. The message read, "He's in the cabin." My stomach dropped. They knew exactly where I was. I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Claire's voice called out sweetly, "Come on, Ethan, don't make this harder." I grabbed the knife from the table, my hands shaking. The door burst open and Claire stepped inside, the man right behind her. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed. Claire tilted her head. "Because we can." I swung the knife wildly, forcing them to back off, and made a run for the woods again. I eventually made it to a road, flagged down a car, and escaped. But even now I can't shake the feeling that they're still watching. The police found nothing, no cabin, no house, no Claire. And then one night I got a text. "Miss you already." I don't know why I thought this time would be different. Re-downloading Tinder felt like picking up a book you hated and hoping for a better ending. Still, I couldn't handle another night alone in my tiny Seattle apartment, eating cold pizza while binging crime documentaries. I'd been off dating apps for months after a string of bad matches, people who looked nothing like their pictures or ghosted after 3 messages. But that night, something told me to give it one more shot. Scrolling through profiles, I was about to call it quits when I saw her, Mia. Her profile photo showed her on a cliff's edge, arms outstretched like she owned the world. Her bio was short but clever. Professional overthinker, part-time thrill seeker. Let's see if you can keep up. We matched, and to my surprise, the conversation wasn't forced or awkward. She was funny, quick-witted, and made me feel like I wasn't completely useless at flirting. After a week of late-night texts and bad memes, we decided to meet. She suggested Discovery Park. It wasn't the usual coffee shop or bar kind of date. This place was a sprawling park overlooking Puget Sound, with trails that cut through forests and opened up to breathtaking views of the water. It was the perfect mix of adventurous and safe, public enough to not worry about serial killers, or so I thought. When I arrived, the late afternoon sun was golden, casting long shadows across the parking lot. My palms were sweaty as I wiped them on my jeans, cursing myself for being nervous. Mia pulled up a minute later, stepping out of her car with a confidence that made me feel like I was the awkward kid in high school all over again. She wore a leather jacket and those combat boots that made her look like she could hike a mountain or win a bar fight. "Ready to get lost in the woods with a stranger?" she teased. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked, making her laugh. We started down one of the main trails, talking about everything from our favorite movies to the weirdest foods we'd ever eaten. She had this way of making you feel like the only person in the world. For the first time in months, I felt alive. As the sun dipped lower, the colors in the sky melted into fiery oranges and purples. We stopped at a clearing to take it all in, the sound of waves crashing faintly in the distance. That's when we noticed the shoe. It was just lying there, a red sneaker caked in mud, right in the middle of the trail. "Looks like someone had a rough day," Mia said, crouching down to examine it. I laughed nervously, but something about it gave me chills. One shoe in the middle of nowhere. Who leaves just one shoe behind? We kept walking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't as alone as we thought. By the time the sun disappeared, the park felt different. The air was heavier, and the trees seemed closer. The only sounds were our footsteps crunching on gravel. Mia seemed unfazed, but I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. "You good?" she asked, catching me mid-shoulder check. "Yeah," I lied. "Just, this place feels creepy at night." "Don't tell me you're scared of the dark," she teased, but there was a flicker of unease in her smile. We rounded a bend, and that's when we saw him. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the low light. But as we got closer, it became clear. A man was standing in the middle of the trail, completely still. He was tall, his face obscured by the hood of his sweatshirt. In his hand, something caught the light. A knife. I froze. My brain screamed at me to move, but my legs wouldn't listen. Stay calm, Mia whispered, her voice low but steady. Should we go back? I whispered back. Before she could answer, the man took a step forward. Hey, Mia shouted, her voice cutting through the silence. What do you want? He didn't answer. He just kept walking toward us, slow and deliberate, the knife glinting with each step. Run, she said, turning to me. What? Run! I stumbled backward, my instincts kicking in too late. Before I could react, the man lunged and Mia was already moving. She grabbed a thick branch from the ground and swung it with all her strength, hitting his arm. The knife flew out of his hand, clattering onto the gravel. Go, she screamed, shoving me. I ran, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. The trail blurred around me as I sprinted, the sound of their struggle fading behind me. I found another couple on the trail, a man and a woman walking their dog. Between gasps, I managed to explain what had happened. They stared at me, wide-eyed, before the man pulled out his phone and called the police. Minutes later, Mia emerged from the shadows, out of breath, but alive. Her jacket was torn, and there was a gash on her arm, but she brushed it off like it was nothing. The police arrived quickly, sweeping the area with flashlights. But when they returned, they had nothing. No man, no knife, just the branch Mia had used to fight him off. It's like he disappeared, one officer said, shaking his head. The strangest part? They found something etched into a nearby tree. A symbol. It looked like an eye, carved deep into the bark, with something almost ritualistic about it. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd escaped something much worse than just a mugging. The symbol haunted me, and the way the man had vanished didn't make sense. I started researching similar incidents at Discovery Park. What I found chilled me to the bone. Reports of strange symbols, attacks, and disappearances dated back decades. Some people believed the park was cursed. Others whispered about a cult that used the area for rituals. Mia, ever the skeptic, brushed it off. Some creep with a knife. That's it, she said. But I could tell she didn't fully believe it. 2 years later, we returned to the park. Not because we wanted to, but because Mia insisted. We can't let fear own us, she said. This time, it was daylight. We stood at the spot where it all happened. The trail looked ordinary, almost peaceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As I pulled out the ring I'd been hiding, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. The trees were still, the air was calm, but deep down I knew the park hadn't forgotten us. Dating apps had always felt like a bad joke to me. Swipe right, swipe left, endless matches that never went anywhere. Most of the time, I'd either get ghosted or the conversations would fizzle out faster than a cheap soda. But one night, during a gaming session, my buddy Mike couldn't stop raving about an app called True Match. It's legit, man, he said, sniping enemies in our match. No bots, no catfish. I've actually met cool girls on there. I rolled my eyes. Sure, Mike. Like I haven't heard that one before. But curiosity got the better of me. After our game ended, I downloaded True Match. The setup felt familiar. Photos, bios, the usual spiel. I wasn't expecting much. Swipe, swipe, no thanks, swipe. And then I saw her. Emily. She had golden blonde hair that caught the light just right, soft blue eyes, and a smile that felt warm. Her bio was simple. Looking for someone genuine. Love books and late-night drives. Something about her felt different, like she wasn't trying too hard. Swipe right. A notification popped up instantly. It's a match. Then came her message. Hey. It was nothing groundbreaking, but it wasn't generic either. We started chatting, and before I knew it, hours had flown by. Emily was funny, easy to talk to, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. It felt real. By the third night, I was hooked. She suggested moving our chat to Snapchat, which felt a little odd, but I didn't want to ruin a good thing. I added her, and she added me back immediately. Her Snap score was low, barely 300. Red flag? Maybe. But I brushed it off. Things started to feel off. For one, Emily always seemed available, no matter when I messaged her. Morning, noon, night. She'd respond within minutes. Her photos on Snapchat were flawless, like something out of a magazine. One evening, I decided to test her. "Hey Emily," I wrote, "can you send me a selfie right now? Just for peace of mind. Too many fake profiles out there, you know?" She read it instantly, but didn't reply. My stomach churned. After a minute, a notification popped up. Snap from Emily. I opened it, half expecting to see a stock photo or a random meme. But it was her. A close-up of her smiling face. Same girl from her profile pictures. Still, I wasn't convinced. "Can you do a peace sign or thumbs up?" I asked. This time the wait was longer. 3 minutes. Another snap came through. I hesitated before opening it. When I did, I saw her holding up a peace sign, a playful smile on her face. Relief washed over me. From there, the conversation flowed naturally again. We talked for another hour before she suggested meeting up. "My place," she said. "I live alone. It'll be chill." She gave me an address in Detroit, near Belle Isle Park. I double-checked her snap map. It matched perfectly. We made plans for the next night. I spent way too much time getting ready the next evening. Fresh clothes, hair gelled just right, a spritz of cologne. My reflection in the mirror didn't look half bad. Emily sent me a snap as I was driving. A photo of her couch with the caption, "You're on your way, right?" "Yep," I replied. She opened it immediately, but didn't respond. The closer I got to her place, the more my nerves kicked in. Her house was unexpected. It sat at the end of a quiet street, small and weathered. The yard was overgrown and the paint was peeling off the walls. The number 22 was nailed crookedly to the doorframe. I parked and sent her another message. "I'm here." No reply. Feeling awkward, I walked up to the door. The porch creaked under my weight. I knocked. Nothing. I rang the bell. Still nothing. Annoyed, I went back to my car and tried calling her through Snapchat. It rang and rang, but she didn't pick up. I was about to leave when I heard a voice. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I turned to see an older woman standing on the porch of the house across the street. She was small, her face lined with years of experience, and something else. Worry? "I'm meeting someone here," I said, pointing to the house. Her face darkened. "No, you're not. No one's lived there for years." "What?" "No, she gave me this address," I insisted. "Emily." The woman crossed the street, her cardigan flapping in the breeze. "Listen, son, you need to leave. That house, it's not right. People around here avoid it." I laughed nervously. "It's just an old house." "No," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto mine. "It's more than that. Trust me." Chilled to the bone, I nodded and got in my car. Before driving off, I checked my phone one last time. Emily had blocked me. At home, I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. The house, the woman's warning, Emily blocking me. It all felt surreal. I sent screenshots of Emily's profile to my friends, hoping for some clarity. An hour later, Darren, my college buddy, responded. "Dude, that's Lisa Andrews," he wrote. "She died a few years ago." Another friend chimed in. "Yeah, I remember her. Overdose, right?" My hands shook as I Googled her name. The first result was an obituary. Lisa Andrews, 24, had died 2 years ago from an overdose. The photo in the obituary? It was Emily. I needed answers. Against my better judgment, I drove back to the house the next day, this time during daylight. The house looked even worse under the sun. The door was slightly ajar. On the porch, I found a small notebook, its cover faded and worn. I flipped through it and found frantic scrawled messages. "It won't let me leave. If you're reading this, run." I froze. A creak echoed from inside the house. I looked up, and the door was now wide open. I stepped inside. The air was icy. heavy with the smell of mildew and rot. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, moving in ways they shouldn't. At the end of the hall, I saw her. Emily, or Lisa, stood there, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. The shadows surged toward me and everything went black. I woke up in my car, parked blocks away from the house. My phone buzzed with a snap from Emily. It was a photo of me standing in the doorway of the house with the caption, "See you soon." It started off like any other boring weeknight. I was sitting on my bed scrolling through my favorite dating app. College was supposed to be this amazing time to meet new people, but for me, it felt like a rerun of high school. Big campus, same faces. That's when I saw her, Emily. She was in my grade back in high school. I recognized her instantly from her profile picture. She had this bright smile and eyes that could pull you in. We had mutual follows on Instagram and Snapchat, but we'd never talked back then. Without overthinking, I swiped right and bam, instant match. I was half expecting her to not reply, but when she did, I felt this weird mix of nerves and excitement. "Hey, how's it going?" I messaged. Her response was quick. "Hey, not bad. Wow, I didn't think we'd match. Funny how we never talked in high school." We kept chatting, and it was easy, almost too easy. We joked about high school cliques, bad cafeteria food, and how weird it was that we'd never had a single class together. It felt natural, like we'd known each other for years. Then, out of nowhere, she suggested, "Why don't we hang out tonight?" I wasn't expecting that. "Like right now?" I asked. "Yeah. I'm cool coming to your place if that's okay." Part of me hesitated, letting someone I barely knew into my home. But the other part, the louder part, thought, why not? I mean, how often does this kind of opportunity pop up? So I told her, "Sure, that sounds great." She asked if my parents were home, and I told her no, just my little sister. Then I sent her my address and waited for the notification saying she was on her way. I sat on the couch, my phone in hand, waiting. The minutes ticked by, and I kept refreshing the app. She hadn't messaged back. 30 minutes turned into an hour. I started to feel uneasy. To distract myself, I opened Instagram and saw that Emily had just posted a story, a meme about being bored at home. That didn't make sense. If she was on her way, why post that? My heart sank a little. Something wasn't adding up. Curious, I checked her Snapchat. She'd posted a photo with a friend, another girl we went to high school with. She wasn't coming. She was out having fun somewhere else. I felt my stomach drop. Was she blowing me off? I decided to confront her. I replied to her Instagram story. "Hey, are you still coming?" A few minutes later, she responded, "What are you talking about?" I sent a screenshot of our chat on the dating app, hoping to jog her memory. Her reply hit me like a ton of bricks. "That's not me. I don't even use that app. Someone's pretending to be me. Report it." My hands were shaking. I just sent my address to a complete stranger. Not only that, but they knew I was home alone with my little sister. Panic set in. I locked every door and window in the house, double-checking each one. My heart was racing as I sat back on the couch, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't. I tried to calm myself down, but every little noise made my skin crawl. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the old wooden floors, it all felt louder, sharper. I kept checking my phone, waiting for something to happen, though I wasn't sure what. And then it did. A blood-curdling scream tore through the house. My heart nearly stopped. It was coming from my sister's room upstairs. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, adrenaline kicking in like never before. As I reached her door, it flew open, and there she was, pale as a ghost, her eyes wide with terror. "Someone's outside my window," she yelled, her voice trembling. I froze for a second, my brain struggling to process what she'd just said. I'd locked all the doors and windows. How could someone be out there? She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the window. But when I looked out, there was nothing. Just the quiet suburban street and the faint glow of streetlights. No movement. No shadows. "It was a man," she insisted, her voice shaky. "He was just standing there, staring at me." I didn't want to scare her more, but I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach. What if she wasn't imagining things? I locked her window, pulled the curtains shut, and told her to stay close to me. "Let's stick together, okay? You can sleep in my room tonight," I said, trying to sound calm. She nodded, clutching her stuffed animal like it was her lifeline. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call for help, but deep down I was praying it wouldn't come to that. It was late, well past midnight, and the house had gone eerily silent. My sister had finally dozed off on my bed, but I couldn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the room, clutching a baseball bat I'd grabbed from the garage earlier. Every creak, every groan of the house felt like a threat. Then I heard it, a faint noise coming from downstairs. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then it grew louder. Footsteps. My throat tightened as I realized someone was in the house. My mind raced. How? I locked everything. I tiptoed to the door and pressed my ear against it. The steps were slow, deliberate, moving through the living room. My palms were slick with sweat as I dialed 911. Whispering as quietly as I could, I told the operator someone had broken in. "Stay on the line," she said calmly. "Help is on the way. Can you lock the door?" I turned to lock the door, but that's when the footsteps stopped, right outside. A shadow moved under the crack of the door. My sister stirred, her eyes snapping open. I motioned for her to stay quiet, but her face crumpled in fear. The handle jiggled, then a loud bang. Someone was trying to break the door down. "I know you're in there," a deep, guttural voice growled. "I can smell you." My sister let out a muffled sob, and I could feel her shaking. The operator on the phone heard it too. "Take your sister and hide," she instructed. "Go now." I grabbed my sister's hand and led her to the closet. We huddled inside, trying to stay as silent as possible. The banging on the door grew louder, more violent. My sister couldn't hold it in anymore. "The police are coming," she screamed. The banging stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then we heard it. A low, menacing laugh that sent chills down my spine. The silence after that laugh was somehow worse than the banging. My sister clung to me, tears streaming down her face, and I could feel her trembling. I held my breath, trying to listen for any movement, any sign of what the intruder might do next. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give us away. Then we heard it. Footsteps, but they were retreating. Slowly they faded down the hallway, and for a split second I thought it was over. The operator's calm voice cut through the silence. "Stay where you are. The police are almost there." Just as I started to believe we might be safe, a crashing sound came from downstairs. Glass breaking. He was leaving, or so I hoped. The operator instructed me to check if the coast was clear and let the police in. I nodded to my sister, mouthing the words, "Stay here," before creeping out of the closet. Every step toward the front door felt like an eternity. My legs were shaking so much I could barely keep my balance. When I reached the living room, I noticed the curtains moving near the broken window. A breeze carried in the cold night air, and for a second I thought I saw a shadow slip into the darkness outside. I unlocked the front door and threw it open just as the red and blue lights of a patrol car lit up the street. 2 officers rushed in, guns drawn, scanning the house. I tried to explain what happened, but the words came out in a panicked jumble. "He was in the house," I managed to say. "He tried to break down the door upstairs. My sister, she saw him first." The officers assured me they would search the house and the yard. My sister came running down the stairs and threw herself into my arms. We clung to each other as the police combed through every inch of the house. When they finally finished, one of them approached us. "We found the point of entry," he said. "The intruder climbed through your parents' bedroom window after scaling the backyard awning. It looks like your sister's scream scared him off before he could do any harm." Harm? The word echoed in my mind. The damage was already done. The police stayed for what felt like hours, taking statements and checking for any additional signs of forced entry. They recommended we spend the night somewhere else, just in case. I didn't argue. I called my friend Joe, who lived a few blocks away, and he offered to let us crash at his place. As I packed a bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Someone out there knew where I lived, knew I'd been alone that night. It wasn't just about the break-in, it was the way he'd taunted us, the way he'd spoken, like he enjoyed it. At Joe's house, my sister finally fell asleep on the couch, but I couldn't. I kept replaying the night in my head, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Was it the app? Was it too trusting? All I knew was that I'd never look at online dating the same way again. The next morning, I checked the app. The fake profile was gone, reported and removed, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Then, as I sat there scrolling aimlessly, a notification popped up. A new match. My heart sank when I saw the profile picture. It was Emily. Again. But this time the bio was different. It read, "You can't hide forever." My blood ran cold. I deleted the app right then and there. Even now, every time I hear a noise in the house, I feel that familiar chill. That night changed me. I learned to be careful, to question everything, and most importantly, to trust my instincts. Because sometimes the person behind the screen isn't who they say they are.